at 02:47 local time, 150 nautical miles north of the Venezuelan coastline. The Black Caribbean night was shattered. Down in the USCGC, Wachusett's cold, ozone-scented Combat Information Center, Tactical Action Officer Lieutenant Commander Sarah Viper Chen watched the routine world of her console dissolve. The silence was ripped apart by a shocking technical anomaly. The SA-80 surface search radar, a piece of sophisticated kit, erupted in a violent bioluminescent explosion of amber, signaling an inbound Class 3 threat. Track 728, a modified go-fast vessel skimming the waves at 80 knots just 4.2 miles out. A second later, an infrared lock from an MH-60R Seahawk registered the fatal action, the unmistakable flash of a primitive shoulder-fired RPG-7 rocket launch leaving a faint streak of superheated air. Its time to impact with the cutter was less than 45 seconds. The enemy vessel La Sombra had just launched a suicidal strike against a U.S. government cutter. Its crew was about to learn they hadn't fired at a single isolated ship. They had fired at a network. The high-stakes drama unfolding in the Caribbean was the inevitable friction point in a new kind of war, the U.S. Navy's enhanced counter-narcotics operation against what the Pentagon had termed narco-terrorist organizations. For weeks, the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and Air Force had systematically dismantled high-value smuggling routes, a campaign that had resulted in a staggering death toll of over 60 individuals and the destruction of multiple vessels. Caracas, backed by the Venezuelan government and its deep ties to illicit profits, and even the UN human rights chief were in an uproar decrying the actions as illegal and unacceptable use of lethal force against non-combatants. But Washington's calculus was different. This was not a policing action. It was a military campaign against transnational organizations funded by illicit profits, often operating with tacit state support from the Maduro regime to undermine U.S. regional security. The USCGC Wachusett was not chasing drug runners. She was upholding a principle. Her presence, part of the Joint Interagency Task Force South JIATFS, was the silent, highly armed guarantor of the Panama Canal supply chain, the choke point through which a major portion of the world's commerce flows. The true significance of this confrontation was the message it would send. Challenging U.S. authority here was challenging the very stability of global trade and the fundamental principles of international maritime law. The crew of La Sombra had been ordered to strike a blow against the imperialist interlopers, an act of calculated bravado intended to demonstrate strength and deter future intercepts. They were about to learn that in this theater, strength is not measured by the size of your rocket or the speed of your boat, but by the instantaneous speed and perfect integration of your sensor network. The stakes were not merely a few bales of illicit narcotics. They were the credibility of American deterrence in its own backyard and the continued stability of the entire Western Hemisphere. The crew of La Sombra, led by a hardened man known only by his nom de guerre El Tiburon, the Shark, believed they were untouchable. Their 12-meter go-fast vessel, modified with a deep V hull and 3 blacked-out Mercury Racing 400R outboard engines, could hit over 80 knots faster than any U.S. surface vessel in the region. They were an elite unit financed by a cartel that was in turn heavily insulated and protected by corrupt Venezuelan military elements. Their strategy was rooted in arrogance and an outdated picture of modern counter-narcotics operations. They saw the U.S. military as a lumbering behemoth easily avoided by speed and stealth in the night. Their mission was a tactical gambit to use the cover of darkness and their superior speed to close the distance, fire a few rockets to disable the cutter's propulsion or radar, and escape before a conventional Navy response could even spool up. They had calculated the time it would take for a U.S. Navy destroyer to cover the distance, and they believed their operational window was about 45 minutes. Their core miscalculation was profound. They thought they were facing a lone white and red-striped Coast Guard cutter. In reality, they had been a tracked target for over 10 continuous hours. 18,000 feet above, unseen and unheard, an MQ-9B Sea Guardian UAV armed with the highly sophisticated AN/APY-8 Lynx II synthetic aperture radar had been painting their every movement from the moment they left a clandestine dock. 150 miles west, a P-8A Poseidon patrol aircraft was fusing that radar data with its own AN/APS-154 advanced airborne sensor data, creating a multi-layer composite track. El Tiburon believed his low-slung dark boat was invisible to the surface radar of the Wachusett. He was correct about the cutter's radar limitations, but dead wrong about the network. His attempt to strike back was not a bold, tactical move. It was a desperate flare in a dark theater, perfectly illuminating his position for a counterstrike that had been pre-programmed long before his finger touched the trigger. His arrogance had not just exposed his vessel, it had exposed the entire operational playbook of the cartel. The U.S. response was already in motion before the 40mm RPG warhead left its tube. The secret to the USCGC Wachusett's overwhelming superiority lay in her ability to act as the central node of the JIATF's kill chain, turning the ship into a mobile tactical command center. It all started 18,000 feet up with the MQ-9B Sea Guardian, whose ANAPY-8 Lynx 2 radar was not merely a tracking sensor. It was operating in an ultra-high-resolution synthetic aperture radar SAR mode capable of focusing on La Sombra's wake and creating a real-time surface image with the astonishing clarity of an aerial photograph, enabling predictive vector analysis. This raw sensor data flowed instantly into the P-8A Poseidon hundreds of miles away, where a network of mission computers fused it with a full spectrum of electronic warfare EW and signals intelligence SIGINT data. This fused battle picture, an information payload measured in gigabytes per second, was then shot back to the Wachusett's Combat Information Center via the high-bandwidth, jam-resistant Link 16 data link. This process from sensor to shooter took a blindingly fast 1.5 seconds. Unimaginable scale. The total parallel processing power dedicated to synthesizing this one-boat threat was estimated to be 100 times greater than a human being's maximum conscious reaction time, giving Lieutenant Commander Chen and her team a crystal-clear look into the near future. The primary kinetic asset was not the cutter's crew-served weapons, but the fully armed MH-60R Seahawk call sign Angel 14, which had been loitering 10 miles out. The MH-60R carried two AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, but for this close-quarters, low-collateral damage environment, its most crucial weapon was not kinetic. It was the sophisticated AN/ALQ-210 Electronic Support Measures ESM suite, which was preparing to unleash a surgically targeted electronic disruption. The crew of the Wachusett was not relying on reflex, but on data-driven certainty. Their primary vessel defense system, the MK-110 57mm naval gun, was already slewed its auto-loading mechanism, placing a 5.7-kilogram high-explosive fragmented HEPF round onto the chamber's rammer. All that was left was for the enemy to commit its final fatal error. T-45 seconds. The sound of the RPG-7's launch, a faint wet whoomp, was picked up by the MH-60R's acoustic sensor. The rocket flying low and unguided was immediately acquired and automatically classified by the Wachusett's AN/SPQ-9B radar as a Priority 1 ballistic threat. Lieutenant Commander Chen was the picture of professional calm.
CIC to Angel 14, execute EW package, standby kinetic release.
She commanded, her voice steady against the rising shriek of the proximity warning alarms. T-30 seconds. The chaos on La Sombra was just beginning to bubble. El Tiburon screamed into his radio, ordering the helmsman to execute a hard, high-speed turn to port. But as he looked out into the night, his world seemed to violently break apart. The AN/ALQ-210 on the MH-60R call sign Angel 14 had just unleashed a focused burst of radio frequency energy, the turning point of the engagement. This was not a blanket jam. It was a surgical strike at the narco vessel's rudimentary GPS receiver, and crucially the radio frequency power coupling for El Tiburon's cheap commercial-grade night vision goggles. For the men on La Sombra, the world went from moonless night to blinding static-filled darkness. Their GPS display showing their only planned escape vector simply froze, then dissolved into meaningless, glitching characters. The helmsman was running blind, his high-speed evasion turning into a chaotic, rudderless drift. T-15 seconds. On the Wachusett's bridge, the tension was a taut wire, but the composure was absolute. Helmsman Petty Officer Greg Ghost Harper didn't flinch, his eyes glued to the targeting display fed by the Link 16 network. Tracking solution locked, 57mm ready, permission to fire, he reported to the TAO. On the screen, the trajectory of the inbound RPG was now a clear, predictable line. T-10 seconds. The RPG, primitive and unguided, was now 2.5 miles out. On La Sombra, El Tiburon was struggling to see anything, his finely tuned plan collapsing into a frenzied scramble. T-5 seconds. The RPG warhead was now less than a mile away, its small rocket motor burning out, leaving it vulnerable. The MK-110 turret on the cutter's bow without a human hand on a trigger completed its final alignment, having received the engage command from the TAO. T0 seconds. The MK-110 roared to life. Not the prolonged brrrt of a CIWS, but a focused, rhythmic, authoritative boom, 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 firing 4 rounds in less than 2 seconds. The first 2 high-explosive, preformed fragmented HEPF rounds, packed with 4,000 tungsten pellets each, were laser-guided by the ship's fire control computer. They impacted La Sombra's hull not to destroy the vessel, but to strategically shatter the engine block and the forward mounting position of the heavy weapon. The sheer kinetic energy alone was devastating. The vessel's speed instantly dropped from 80 knots to 0. Its hull breached its engines, destroyed, and its hostile action neutralized. The final fatal mistake for the crew was the belief that their attack could be simultaneous with their evasion. The network knew their moves before they did. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, jet fuel, and salt. But the deep, resounding silence that immediately followed the MK-110's roar was the most absolute signature of victory. The inbound RPG, now less than 1,000 meters from the cutter, tumbled harmlessly into the water, its ballistic guidance futile against a target that had suddenly and violently stopped. The U.S. vessel was untouched. La Sombra, however, was a flooded listing wreck. The entire 45-second engagement had been an unprecedented goldmine. The MQ-9B had recorded the exact moment El Tiburon activated his encrypted SATCOM burst before the attack, allowing U.S. SIGINT analysts to instantly de-hop the frequency pattern and compromise the cartel's entire secure communication chain for the next 72 hours. The Seahawk's FLIR had documented the distinct thermal signature of the vessel's modified racing engines at peak speed, providing a new high-confidence targeting profile for all future automated systems. The 70 crew members on the USCGC Wachusett had won without a scratch, not through luck, but through relentless training and the seamless, integrated function of the JIATFS network. Their calmness in the face of imminent threat, Lieutenant Commander Chen's steady command, Petty Officer Harper's perfect fire control lock was a testament to the professionalism and discipline that defines the U.S. Armed Forces. It was a victory not just of superior firepower, but of superior networked information architecture. This wasn't just a fight against a single desperate drug vessel. This was a direct proxy war challenge to the United States' ability to enforce the rule of law in its own sphere of influence and protect the global commons. The strikeback attempt by La Sombra failed because their strategy was based on an assumption that is now totally obsolete, that they could isolate and fight a single U.S. asset. Today's lesson. In modern integrated warfare, the age of the solitary vessel is definitively over. When you challenge a single U.S. Navy or Coast Guard platform, you are not engaging one crew, one radar, or one gun. You are engaging the entire fully integrated multi-domain sensor grid of the United States. From 18,000 feet in the air to the submerged sonars below the waves, every U.S. asset acts as a lens for a singular, unstoppable intelligence and kinetic system. The Link 16 network ensured that El Tiburon was defeated by a target he couldn't even see before his own weapon could reach its mark. For nations or organizations that seek to profit from global instability, the message of this silent promise is chillingly clear. The United States knows where you are, it knows what you are doing, and its data network will deliver the counterpunch before your weapon even leaves the rail. The $1,200 cost of the RPG rocket was traded for the blueprints of an entire cartel's operational security and intelligence goldmine that will feed into future operations for months to come. The final question for the audience is this. If a sophisticated narco-terrorist cell backed by a hostile government cannot find a weakness in the U.S. network, what chance does a major conventional adversary truly have against the full might of the American war machine? Comment below. Which country do you think is next to learn this fatal lesson? Like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss our next in-depth analysis of America's overwhelming military power.